Hello and welcome back. For my last video, I basically compressed everything because I wanted to make a bit of money, and so you can see my balance went up to about 2.7 million. I've also mostly A-rated this Viper, and so that was kind of the goal. I'm still outsider rank 45% with the Imperials, and I intend to get some more Imperial ranking. And see how we go. So that's my goal, just so everybody knows. What I might start doing with these videos is kind of cutting them up into sections, similar to the last one, just simply because progress in this game requires a bit of time, and not all that time I can record and put on on YouTube. I don't think anybody really wants to sit and watch me play the game for hours and hours and hours. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and break up the videos a little bit, and yeah, we'll see how we go. Okay, so right, let's see what we can do. Some missions. Right, so we've got, interestingly, we've got a corporate strike against the Gold Syndicate, and that's for sentry skimmers. This is really quite easy to do. Doesn't give me that much reputation or influence though. So let me just put that one under advisement, as it were. This is lots of massacre missions because lots of massacre missions mainly because they're at war. So let's see. Okay, so got this one. That's 6 sentry skimmers. Same kind of thing. They want thermic alloys. So what I might do is just do the one for East India Company. It doesn't take long to do. Oh, hang on. It's 2 of them. 6 or 9. I'll go with a 9. Let's do this. I already have a planetary vehicle hangar. That's good. And these missions, of course, do not stack. So I'm going to go and do that one, and see how we get on. Let's have a quick look at the universal cartographics. Nope, I don't have anything. Didn't think I did. Okay, so let's get going. So what I'll try and do is I'll try and probably cut every single time I do a jump, and I will come back in for the stations and mission handings. This is my goal. I might not always be successful, but that's what I'm going to try and do. Okay, so let's get on with it. So yeah, this is a sentry skimmer mission. It's going to go very similar to the one which I did previously, so I'm going to drive around on the surface. So I will catch you guys on the planet, or at least on approach. And I'll try and maybe talk a bit about the science of Elite a little bit. It's one of my other series. Since those of you who don't know, not that I have many people following this particular YouTube trail, but I'm a particle physicist. This is my day job. I'm a particle physicist, and so science and technology, astronomy, it's kind of, it's my kind of thing. I really enjoy it. And so I made a couple of videos previously about the science of Elite Dangerous, and how in many ways lots of the background simulation in terms of the astronomy is actually quite good. It gets a lot of stuff right. And so I haven't done another video, mainly because I just recently moved house. I moved from the United Kingdom to Canada, and yeah, so I haven't really got myself all set back up. The other issue is that I don't have a scanner. In my previous videos, I was using a scanner which I borrowed in my office. So I would work late in my office, and I would use the scanner in my office back in the UK. And I don't have that facility, so I would basically pen and pencil draw all of my diagrams. and only occasionally have an actual computer-generated diagram. And so yeah, I have a bunch of ideas for my next video, and I've done some preliminary work on one or two of them, and it's just finding that little bit of time when I feel like actually making it. Most of the time I'm sort of feeling like doing other things. So really I should just get off my backside and just put a little bit of effort into thinking about what's going to go into this video. But basically there's two which I can talk about, and one of them is heat, and the other one is the first one is heat, and the other one is gravity, and stuff like how the FSD works and how stars should work in game, as in the shapes of the stars, and some of these more interesting and unusual sights in the game, which could be made 10 times more spectacular if they could implement it, or if they did implement it. Stuff like contact binaries, parasitic binaries systems, which would be super dangerous to fly anywhere near. But yeah, so we don't have those in game, but I was going to make a video to talk about those, so maybe I shouldn't spoil that too much. I think heat is perhaps one I can ramble around a little bit while I run across this planetary surface. And there's me saying I was going to cut this video up. I think what I'll do is I'll ramble for a little bit, and then once I've got playing into the mission, I will then start to chop things up. But the heat in Elite Dangerous is something which people often criticize. This is mainly forum criticism, and the forums really should be taken with a bit of a pinch of salt. A lot of people who spend a lot of time posting on the forums without wanting to sound elitist, sometimes they quite frankly don't know what they're talking about. And so, you know, in game they're saying, oh, I can see an object from miles away, and you know, surely we've got radar or optics or lidar, which can lock onto, which can allow our ship to lock onto a target. You know, that's true. That is kind of true, except for the fact that, you know, we already have stealth technology. Stealth technology in real life in 2018, and you know, I get it. LiDAR, optical tech. Yeah, I get it. You know, if we can see it with our eyes, the ship's computer can definitely see it. That's true. As a given, I'll give you that as a hand wavy problem. Other things, you know, I don't buy so much. So heat is a great example, because heat is something which most people don't really understand. I mean, they think they do because they're like, oh, you know, hot, cold. And I saw on television one time that in space it's like minus 250 degrees in the shade, and it's 100 and 200 degrees in the sun. But the problem with how most people understand heat or temperature is that we often think of temperature in terms of heat transfer. And what I mean by that is that on planet Earth, we experience heat or temperature because of transfer between a hot object and our skin, for example. And oh, that's not the ship I'm looking for. Yeah. Okay, so that was the actual object. It's not what I want. So yeah. Now, the reason why we always think of it in these terms is because we're thinking of heat transfer. We're thinking hot body, cold object. Therefore, you know, you touch something hot, and it scalds you, right? Now, the thing is that the reason why this works in atmosphere is because of the atmosphere. So the atmosphere is essentially a working fluid. You can use gas or liquid to transfer heat. You can use solids to transfer heat as well. And the difference is that in space, well, okay, I back up. There are three methods of transferring heat. That's radiation, convection, and conduction. The conduction is like direct touching something. You're directly transferring heat from one body to another. Convection is a similar thing. You know, you've got a working fluid which basically takes the heat and moves away. And you can have like forced convection and things like this. And that's very, very, very efficient. The least efficient process is radiation. Radiation is just the emission of like infrared radiation, just EM radiation. It's very, very inefficient. And in space, that's all you have. You don't have convection. You don't have convection, and you certainly don't have conduction, especially not in a spaceship. And so you then ask the question, how do you get rid of heat? Right? You've got something's flying in. You basically got, for example, you've got a vulture coming in. Yeah, you've basically got a few megawatt power plant. That power plant is a fusion power plant, and it's contained inside your spaceship. That is essentially producing heat. Every part of your ship the energy will eventually get dumped to heat. So whatever power you use, heat. Now, that's all well and good. But as I just told you, transferring heat by radiation is incredibly inefficient. And so what you basically have to do, that's where the heat vent comes in. That's where the heat vents come in Elite, where essentially if you have an object which is very hot, it starts to glow. And so you've probably all seen these things where you have like a red hot poker, or you have a fire, you put a piece of metal in there and it goes red hot. And that's basically exactly what I'm talking about. This is the emission of black body radiation, and that scales by the 4th power of a temperature. Right, so basically if you can have a material which glows yellow, white hot, you're able to transfer a fair amount of energy. You also have to firstly make sure that you don't melt that object, and secondly you need to make sure that it has a very high surface area, so you're actually able to get rid of the heat. And then what you've got there is essentially an object which is spewing radiation. And that's why in Elite you use this radiation as your locking mechanism, because there is some truth in what people say. In space, the temperature of the background in space is essentially, for most intended purposes, it's basically about 3 Kelvin. And so if you've got something which is the background is at 3 Kelvin, and then you've got a ship, and that ship, the hottest points on that ship are basically the thrusters and the heat vents, and the heat vents are like toasting away at like 4,000 degrees. Let's say you've got some exotic alloy, and there you go. You've literally got a massive source of radiation which you can pinpoint, and that's the reason why you don't really want to rely on optical, because optical radiation, it basically relies for either you to fire a laser or light source at your object, or it requires a background like sun or star. It's just not as efficient at detection. Or you can just lock onto the massive infrared signal which is spewing out of this ship. So that's basically the heat mechanic, sort of in its basic terms. Now, it's the same thing. People often complain about like, what your the efficiencies of like your lasers, for example. Like, why am I firing a laser in space? Okay, it shouldn't make a noise given, but often people have to think that this PIPS thing here is about energy, and really it's not about supplying energy. So one comment I remember hearing one time was multi-cannons are basically like chemical propellant, right? I mean, it's like a bullet. You're essentially firing a bullet, and it's totally possible to fire a bullet in space. You just need the right chemical mix. It doesn't need to need oxygen in the form of a gas. You can do it in other ways, but yeah, basically. Oh, is this going to be? No. Damn it. I am, however, going to pick up this cargo. At least some of it, if it's worth it. Ooh, platinum. I will definitely have 2 canisters of platinum. Yes, please.
Cargo scoop deployed. Cargo hold.
Maximum capacity. Right, so where was I? Yeah, so if you've got multi-cannon, right, and you're basically firing it, and people often will complain like, oh, you know, but it's a chemical propellant. It doesn't get hot. So why does it say thermal overload? And well, the thing is it's not really that it doesn't get hot. It does get hot, but the mechanics of the device, it's moving, it's going to have friction, it's going to get hot, and basically regardless of whether you are is that a rock? Yes, it is. Regardless of whether you're firing a laser or you're firing a chemical propellant weapon, you're producing heat, and you have to get rid of that heat. And that's actually what the pips are. The pips are nothing to do with the actual running cost of the actual energy cost of the laser, right? It's entirely about heat dissipation. I mean, it's entirely about heat dissipation. Your ship basically has a cooling capacity, and right. So your ship basically has a cooling capacity. If you imagine it as being like, you know, coolant lines, which are constantly pumping. I don't know. Let's say that, you know, it's like a CPU cooler where it's got like some kind of helium heat transfer system. So you're basically pumping coolant around your ship to keep your pumping coolant around your ship to keep it going. If you stop pumping the coolant to your weapons, they will eventually overheat. And once they have overheat, they will trip out, and you will not be able to run them until you cool them back down. I mean, it makes perfect sense. It's actually much more logical than this concept where it's like you have a certain amount of laser power, you have a certain amount of power in like a battery bank, because that doesn't make sense. You know, it's nothing about running out of power. It's about running out of capacity, right? So think about it. You're firing your weapons. And what's going to happen is... Oh, what's this? Oh, promotion to surveyor. Cool. That's probably because of picking up materials. I didn't realize that surface surveying got you anything, but that's cool. Yeah, it's think of it this way. You have a bunch of coolant lines. And your ship has a certain capacity for dealing with that heat, right? And so what happens is you're basically your power distribution system is basically to do with how much capacity it's able to deal with before it trips. So think of it as like a reservoir. You have a very large reservoir of your coolant, and so when you're firing your lasers, your coolant warms up, and once that coolant reaches a certain temperature, it's not going to be very efficient at transferring the heat away. And so if you have like a large reservoir of coolant, it's going to take longer for it to overheat. So that's why, for example, like you have a grade A power distributor, and it does better at handling the heat load. It's all about coolant. And in a way, it's almost a similar thing with your engines. So, you know, with your engines, there's lots of different ways you can actually figure these things. And you know, the way I imagine it working, if I wanted to think of a way which made sense, is that your power plant is essentially producing heat and plasma, this kind of thing, and your thrusters essentially are some kind of plasma-based thrusters. They simply have to be. And so again, it's mostly about the reason why your engine capacity. I'm going to be very unlucky here, aren't I? Oh, ooh, nice. Okay. let's have a quick look at what... Well, it's not wanted, so this is going to give me a bounty, but whatever. Or not. Oh dear. Sentry's glitching. Oh. Stinger. Oh dear. Come on. Okay, well, whatever. Okay, so did that get me any... Was that who I wanted? Yeah, nice.
You have entered a trespass zone.
Let's
Incoming mission critical message.
see if I can do this from closer. It's unlikely. Oh dear, what's going on? Okay. Whatever. Okay, whatever.
Handbrake is on.
There's some materials there. I should go get back and get them. Okay, that sometimes happens with sentries.
Handbrake is on.
I'll have that. There's actually some good stuff there, but I'm gonna leave it and keep going. Okay, so yeah, so everything works in the same way, right? With your thrusters, you can imagine it as basically being that your thrusters need to be kept cool, or the plasma delivery to your engine components, they have to be kept cool. And again, it's a similar thing. It's like you're regulating the heat flow throughout your ship. And it's a similar thing with your systems. Your shield generators are going to use a certain amount of a certain wattage of power to generate the shields and maintain them. And so yeah, when you are recharging your shields, you're basically dumping energy, using energy to regenerate your shields. And that energy which you're using, you have to regulate that as coolant. Now, how this works in terms of like my SRV is anybody's guess, but it's likely a similar thing. I mean, my point is that if you produce heat in space and you do not get rid of it, you will melt your ship. That's basically what will happen. And so it isn't just the case that if you're in space, it's cold. It's not. It's as cold as it's as cold as the time you've got to wait. People have this kind of impression that what they've been shown in Hollywood is correct. That basically, if you were in space, if you were exposed to space, that you would instantly freeze because space is cold, and it's simply not true. In some ways you would freeze, but that's a very different thing. So the reason why people say, oh, in space you freeze, is because of the vapor pressure of water. Water evaporates in vacuum. It actually evaporates. It sublimates when you're in hard vacuum of space. You end up with liquid water, which will turn instantly solid, and it will turn instantly solid, and it will start to sublimate. Now, that doesn't mean that that's a cold ice. That's actually warm ice. It's ice at room temperature because of the pressure, and that's what people really don't understand. They have this idea that your whole body will freeze instantly, and it's just simply not the case. I mean, you'd be dead. I mean, you're not going to survive very long in vacuum. So the harshness of space is definitely, that's most likely true. The science that movies try and show people is more for dramatic effect than it is actually based in any kind of reality. Woo! Yeah, so this is turning into more of a materials search. But to be honest, that's the reason why this has turned into a bit more of a materials search is because this planet seems to be yielding, actually yielding minerals. The one I was on previously just wasn't yielding anything. Right, let's get back on task. Woo! But yeah, so heat's an interesting one because basically in space the regulation of heat is everything. It's life and death. Basically, if you know that's how spacesuits work. I mean, basically a spacesuit is designed to insulate your body from the external heat sources and cold, so that you're basically able. So it's basically able to regulate your temperature such that you aren't your legs aren't freezing while your head is warm. It's the idea is it's to try and keep you isolated from the elements outside and regulate your body temperature and things on the inside, while at the same time getting rid of your heat. And it's just how it works. You would die pretty quickly of heat exhaustion if you lost your ability, if your spacesuit lost its ability to run its coolant systems. That's what makes most of the bulk of a spacesuit. It's got coolant systems in it. Ooh, hopefully this one is something juicy. Yeah, so there's other things as well, which Elite does very, very well. Doesn't get everything perfect. I mean, I'm not just going to sit there and say, oh, it's the best game ever, it's the best simulation ever, but it gets a lot of things correct. I mean, for example, everybody complains about the flight model. I'm with you. You know, it should be Newtonian essentially, but think about it this way: unless we can invent some kind of specialist device which will dampen inertia. So essentially, inertia is your body's or any object's sort of resistance to movement, essentially. Ow. Okay, great. 6. Brilliant. I just need to do... Actually, what's all this stuff? Because if this is actually good stuff, I'm going to call my ship back. The reason why I didn't call my ship back... No. The reason why I did not call my ship back previously was because the area was not flat, and I didn't want to have to drive for 1.5 miles to get my stuff. Yeah, so basically, like, yes, I'm with you there, Newtonian physics all the way. I mean, that's how it should be. But the thing is as well is that unless you've got some way of dampening inertia, and that is basically that inertia is an object's sort of resistance to having movement imparted on it. Is that if you're able to completely dampen inertia, then yes, Newtonian physics, it would be great to use it. But the thing is, most of the flight model is kind of based around the limits of the human body and it's having comfortable flight. Right, because if you actually think about the velocities which you travel, even in an SRV, this is meters per second. You're traveling at 20 or 60, what is it? 20 something meters per second. That's like driving down the highway. That's sort of, thinking about it correctly, maybe my numbers are wrong right now, so I can't check. But that's basically driving like the speed limit or over the speed limit down the highway, and you're doing it across rough terrain in a 6-wheeled vehicle. That's why there's a limit. You know, you totally could probably go faster than that, but there would be no useful purpose of it because you would absolutely destroy the wheels. You'd absolutely destroy any mechanical moving part as soon as you hit the first rock. It makes sense if there's a limit, and it's the same thing for your ship. If you were basically limited by your basically maneuvering thrusters, and you were, let's say you were traveling traveling at 300 meters a second. That's basically Mach 1. 300 and something like 350 is the speed of sound at the Earth's surface. So if you want to ask a pilot what happens to you if you're traveling at Mach 1 and you pull full throttle back, full pitch back on your flight stick, and that's limited basically by the turn radius of, like, let's say an F-16 or something like this is limited by the control surfaces and the fly-by-wire system, and also the structural integrity, right? And basically most aircraft are designed to be able to pull 9, 10G turns. Let's say that's the same for a spaceship. What you find if you do the mathematics. What you find if you do the maths is that okay, good. Yeah, what you find if you do what? Failed? What's this? Or is that? Oops, it is. Mission successful. Oh yeah, 9. That's right. Cool.
Handbrake is on.
What else was there saying? Time bonus. Oh no, I've not made that. I don't think. Oh no, unless it's got 90 minutes left. In which case, let's get back.
Ship recalled.
Ship recalled. Okay, so what's all this? What's all this then?
Warning, you have entered a trespass zone.
Okay, so if some of this, if my ship gets down and it's not in the middle of nowhere, I will come and pick some of this up. Yeah. So if you basically in a Cobra, and you look at the turning radius of a Cobra going at full speed, what that turn radius is actually perhaps limited to is your pilot's ability to actually, not get crushed to death. I mean, that's how I see it. That's how I actually see it. Is that your pilot wants to be able to survive. Your commander, it doesn't want to get absolutely crushed to death by pulling a high G turn, right? So you've got a flight suit. The flight suit's going to help you, right? It's exactly the same way as a flight suit in a modern jet aeroplane works. It will pressurize different parts in order to keep the blood flowing to your brain, not just straight to your feet, and also stop you having a heart attack while it's doing it. But it's the same principle. If you've got a ship, I can show you now. If you've got a ship and you're flying in a straight line at Mach 1, your ability to turn around is more to do with your pilot's survival than it is to do with the physical capabilities of the ship. The ship could easily flip on a dime. The ship could easily flip on a dime and change direction instantly. Problem is it would kill you. It would just it would outright kill you. The amount of stress on the pilot, right? So that's 281. That's not Mach 1, right? And yeah, okay, I've got this really terrible turning radius, right? But if you were to actually do the calculation of what my turning radius was and what my rotation speed is and my velocity, and work out what the centripetal acceleration of my pilot into the seat, and I would not be surprised if that comes out as like 7 or 8 G. It is just the case. I think I did the calculation once for the Cobra, and it works out that a full boosted turn is like something like 15 G or something ridiculous, unless I completely messed up my calculation. Totally possible. Anyway, let's get going. So it's been fun. Oh, what am I doing? I don't want to go there. Why did I pick there? I want to go there. Oh, I can't, because it's on the opposite side of the planet. Yep. mean, there's other issues as well in terms of heat and how it's represented in game. I mean, the truth is, for example, that if you were to cool down your ship and everything like that, you would not be able to suck the heat out of the windows. You would not be able to suck the heat out of the windows so fast that you would freeze water on them instantly. It just wouldn't work like that. But obviously you need a visual cue, which you understand as being, hey look, you're cold. I mean, things do freeze out pretty quickly, but I mean, you're simply not. There's simply no reason why you would cool the entirety of the ship that quickly. But then again, you know, maybe I'm wrong.
Approval granted. Please set down at bay 42.
So again, also to do with gravity and, as I mentioned, centripetal acceleration. This is exactly why starports spin around. That being said, the most efficient design for a comfortable living space would actually be a cylinder, not a... Oh god, I don't even know what shape this is. But if you imagine these side bits, that would be really uncomfortable because the centripetal acceleration is actually pointing directly outwards, and yet your building is built at a slant. So I think this is more of a historic design than what would be. The Orbis style stations are closer to what you perhaps would expect of a livable space. I just wanted to let that guy pass me.
1,000 meters from touchdown.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a mission.
Landing successful. Begin lockdown.
Yeah, so this is going to go up to 3.7 mil. A bit more than that, actually. I am going to pass up on the embedded firmware. Mostly because, like I said before, I'm not actually going for engineering just yet. So I'm going to go for the money. Give me the money. Give me. And I got a little bit of bonus. That's great. Brilliant.